What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, June 11th, 2018, and start of a brand new week, getting into the middle of the month. And as a matter of fact, getting close to 4th of July, which, you know, will be interesting. They've already got the party poppers in the supermarkets, and because that's all we're allowed to have anymore for New Year's and 4th of July. And they dress them up to look like the fireworks we knew when we were a kid, but they're all just party poppers. You pull a little string, get a little confetti. That's all they trust us with anymore. Although I'm already starting to hear the illegals being played with, so it'll be a little bit raucous. And of course, with RIMPAC taking place in and around Pearl Harbor on July 4th, we can count on the Navy to give us an absolutely splendiferous firework display, and I'm looking forward to that. Claire doesn't like fireworks very much. I do. I really do. All right, so let's get on into it here. We got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. As you know, the world's eyes are on the Korean summit. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, and they're already gathered there, and the world's media is looking at it. Fox News literally has a countdown clock, like this is a space mission or something. It's T-minus 4 hours and 58 minutes until liftoff with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And that may be contributing to an unrealistic expectation that this summit is just going to launch, go into orbit, re-enter, splash down, over and done with, mission will be a success. And I think that's unrealistic. I think both sides are going into this with some unrealistic expectations. But one thing Donald Trump is doing is he's trying to shut down all the reckless talk coming out of his administration. Now, last week we were reporting on how John Bolton was sidelined for making statements that were inflaming the situation with North Korea, like the Libyan option. And it's well known that Bolton doesn't want there to be a success at this summit. He wants a war. He's not going to fight it. His kids won't fight it. He wants your kids to go fight it. But that's where he's going with all of this. But Trump is out there basically saying no crazy talk from anybody in the administration. And this went to everybody, including Mike Pence and all of his aides, saying just shut the heck up. Let me do this. Now, Kim Jong-un is taking the opportunity to play tourist. He doesn't have to deal with the jet lag that Donald Trump does, the little home court advantage he has. But apparently he's been making the rounds. He and his entourage are staying at the Marina Bay Sands. He was spotted at the Sky Park observation deck. So he's having a good time. He's enjoying himself, which is obviously a good thing, sends a relaxed message. Now, a lot of people are saying, what exactly is on the table here in terms of the North Korean summit? Obviously, from the U.S. point of view, the overt issue is immediate denuclearization and a rollback on their long-range ballistic missiles. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen simply because North Korea's political leadership, including Kim Jong-un, are smart enough to realize the U.S. has played this game before in places like Syria and Libya and Iraq. Talk them out of their weapons of deterrence with promises of security and safety, and then promptly invade. And after having done it to 3 other nations, North Korea, let's be blunt, would be very foolish to say, oh yes, we trust the United States government. Here you can take our nuclear weapons and we'll stop making these long-range missiles and we'll just sit here and wait quietly to be invaded. Because remember, technically the Korean War is still ongoing. A state of war exists between North Korea and South Korea, and by extension the United States. So a lot of people are saying that basically what North Korea is hoping to get for any concessions that they're willing to make is financial support. And apparently Trump is going in there with a promise of future prosperity for the North Korean people, which is going to be tough to deliver when you realize he can't deliver prosperity to the majority of the American people. But Trump is out there basically saying that North Korea could wind up very rich, and it sounds like more Trump hyperbole than anything else. Frankly, the way that North Korea can become prosperous is not with more handouts from the U.S. taxpayer, but by formally ending the Korean War and reunifying with South Korea. Because North Korea has the raw materials, the natural resources South Korea needs. South Korea is the manufacturing powerhouse, and working together, they could make the peninsula very rich. But of course, then the United States would be out of the area, they'd be out of control, and that's not what the United States agenda is. They want to be controlling everything on planet Earth. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Dennis Rodman is over there as, I guess, an unofficial ambassador, goodwill ambassador, peacemaker. And the fact is that Dennis Rodman and Kim Jong-un are very good friends. Apparently, Kim Jong-un is a huge, huge basketball fan. And there have been a lot of pictures taken of them together and obviously enjoying each other's company. And Rodman may be in a position to sort of keep Kim Jong-un more mellow and pleasant, although we don't really know what Kim Jong-un is about. And even Trump is trying to find out what he's really like in terms of personality, as opposed to the evil image that's been crafted for him by the American corporate media. So there's a lot of opacity regarding North Korea. And we've seen it before, the demonization of leaders that the U.S. wants to go in and take their countries. We saw it with Iraq. We saw it with Libya. We saw it with Syria. We're seeing it now with Iran. That propaganda campaign is ramping up right now. But Rodman, needs to be careful that he doesn't violate the Logan Act. But he's definitely in a position to help the U.S. agenda if he so chooses here. Meanwhile, back here at home, apparently Senator Lindsey Graham didn't get the memo from Trump about toning down the crazy talk, because he's out there again saying that if Kim Jong-un doesn't agree to complete and immediate denuclearization, then the U.S. should invade North Korea. Well, Lindsey, if you really feel that way, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's your day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we're going to call Kim Jong-un and tell him you are on your way to whip his butt all by yourself. But the American people, after going on 18 years of war, we're really kind of sick of it, because it doesn't seem to matter how many wars the United States gets into, there's always another one on the horizon. And we're kind of a little fed up of living in a wartime economy, of seeing our nation just decaying before our eyes from neglect, because all of the money is going into the war machine. Now, apparently, once the summit is over, Donald Trump is going to, on his way home, stop and visit the military bases in Guam and also right here in Hawaii, which means the traffic is going to be gridlocked again, but we'll see. I mean, it's not going to be as bad as it was when Obama came out here to the islands. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve Elkins, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Michael. Reading an article by a reporter by the name of Rogers talking about how much money, fortune can be made in North Korea, and which brought me back to something I think you spoke about before, and I've spoke about $4.5 trillion worth of lithium resources in North Korea. And yes. I can just imagine the article never mentioned that at all. It was a very poorly written article. It just said fortunes could be made, but that's what I'm thinking. And of course, it's always about the money. So just wanted to address that with you. I think this is what they're thinking. The United States thinking about getting their hands on this lithium, $4.5 trillion worth.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lithium has become very important with the advent of the lithium battery. And don't forget, North Korea is also ideal for growing opium, and the CIA would like to gain control of that, because right now it represents competition for the CIA's opium coming out of Afghanistan.
That's it, Michael. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And let's see here. As long as Trump is out there in North Korea demanding denuclearization, I guess he feels like throwing his weight around, if you will. The U.S. is now calling on Japan to reduce their stockpiles of plutonium. And you need to understand, Japan does not have a nuclear weapons program, at least that we know of, but Japan relies very heavily on nuclear power, uranium fission reactors, such as, sadly, the ones that got destroyed at Fukushima. And after all these years of relying on nuclear power, they have built up a stockpile of plutonium, which is what comes on out of those reactors when you swap out the fuel rods. But Japan does not produce plutonium in terms of refining it down to anything that would be considered weapons grade. They're storing it. But Japan has about 47 tons of plutonium, enough to produce around 6,000 nuclear warheads. And foreign and domestic critics have pointed to these reserves as a ready source of bomb-making material should Japan choose to become a nuclear weapons state. So the U.S. is now saying Japan has to reduce their plutonium stockpile. Okay, what is Japan going to do with it? Where's it going to go? Are they supposed to ship it to the United States for safekeeping? It's always been a big problem with fission reactors. What do you do with the leftovers, which are highly toxic, flammable, and radioactive? So, and the timing of this is also a little awkward because Japan, of course, is involved in this summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un. And we don't need to be alienating somebody who's supposed to be on the U.S. side in these negotiations. Anyway, getting on down to the war zones, the United Nations has come on out and said that more than 920,000 people have been displaced inside Syria during the first 4 months of this year, the highest level in the 7-year conflict. And the UN is saying they're seeing a massive displacement, and this is coming from Panos Mountzis, the UN Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for Syria. So Syria is still dragging on. The U.S. has been in there trying to oust Assad for, 7 years now. And they're just thrashing around in all these quagmires. Same thing with Afghanistan. It's like those little roach motels. The U.S. checks in, but it can't check out. They're still dealing with issues in Iraq. They're really overly extended. Speaking of Afghanistan, there was an article came out of Global Research talking about why the United States persists in staying in Afghanistan, even though there is supposedly a U.S.-friendly puppet regime installed. And this article comes on out and says that the reality is that Afghanistan, like North Korea, has vast reserves of minerals and natural gas. And those are the prize. It's all about conquering other people's natural wealth and stealing it from them. Now remember, when the United States invaded Afghanistan 17 years ago, it's our longest running war outside the Korean War. The excuse given was it was retaliation for the attacks of 9/11. September 11, 2001. Oh, it's those gosh darn Afghanis. Except for one problem. There were no Afghan planes in the skies of New York on September 11, 2001. And none of the accused terrorists many of whom turned out to still be alive after 9/11, are Afghani. It was just an excuse. We're going to stage this horrific false flag terror event to launch a century of unending war. Who's first on the list? Well, let's go by alphabet. Afghanistan. We'll go with them first. We're going to take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was just calling. You're talking about the international situation, and I supported Trump. I know you supported Trump. I know largely for me it was just because he wasn't Hillary.
Yeah.
When I look at what's going on, it was hope. There was hope that he might be different. There wasn't a lot to go on, but it was. But I'm looking at what's going on, Mike, and I'm seeing France and Germany and Britain. We're talking about putting sanctions on them.
Yes.
We're talking about we've now alienated Canada. He's doing what he's confronting Russia. He's doing everything. The only person he's doing everything they want is Israel. And the government we have is the one that the millionaires pay for.
Yes.
They're gonna, and Trump. One of my hopes was that he had enough money that he'd be impervious to that, but apparently not.
Nope.
And I think it's time that we absolutely. I mean, if Canada is turning their back on us, and Britain and France and Germany, something is very, very wrong.
Yes. No, we're becoming isolated as a nation. I was saying all along, all this trade war and all these sanctions are going to economically cut us off from the rest of the world, because all of these countries being hit with these tariffs and these sanctions, they're not going to pay them. They're simply going to turn around and do business with somebody else, because the world's economic order is no longer centered on the United States. Certainly in the economic sense, we've returned to a multipolar world.
And Mike, for geostrategically, we've led NATO by the nose into Israel's wars and needless confrontations in Syria and Libya and Afghanistan and Iraq, and so there's no compelling economic reasons to not be with us, and then there's compelling geostrategic reasons to not be with us as well. We're leading them into disaster.
Yes. I mean, everybody can see that, there was sort of this global coalition that was held together by Israel's influence over the U.S. government and other governments, but that's starting to fall apart because the nations are starting to pull away, and they may all still do what Israel wants, but each nation may interpret that slightly differently. So the cohesion is definitely breaking down. We are headed for a major upset, and it's going to be the crash of the global economic system, the full reset, because we can't get out of this artificially created debt without the equivalent of a jubilee. And after all these wars and all these broken treaties and broken promises, the international order is clearly breaking down, and I'm sure that's going to be very much discussed at the upcoming Bilderberg meeting.
Mike, as you were discussing, this is analogous to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. That was a very...
Okay.
And it's
Peter, your phone is cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're coming up here on a commercial break. So we're going to take a moment to hear some words of wisdom from our advertisers, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And this next article actually dovetails with what Peter was saying. That the United States is starting to alienate the rest of the world, including our traditional allies here. So over on Russia Today's Worlds Apart show, former Austrian Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssel, who's also a former head of the European Council, says it's time for Europe to defend itself from U.S. policies that undermine the international system of norms. He's putting it very politely because recent U.S. policies are causing a huge amount of chaos across the globe, economically, militarily. It's causing huge amounts of suffering. Reference that story about 940,000 Syrians have been displaced, meaning they have lost their original homes and they've had to seek shelter elsewhere because of these horrendous wars that are going on. So now you have the EU is starting to say, we're going to pull back. And you're already seeing the European Union start to resist going along with any more U.S. sanctions on Russia or Iran. Indeed, you've seen how the European Union still wants to stay with the P5+1 agreement, the Iran deal, despite U.S. pressure to the contrary. So the United States is actually losing its global influence. And people around the world are no longer looking at the United States government as some kind of a moral leader of the so-called free world, but just as a schoolyard bully that everybody's just getting sick and tired of. So it is. The United States is a nation in decline for many of the same reasons that the Western Empire of Rome fell and the Soviet Union fell. And it's going to happen. I don't know when, but to me, the writing is on the wall. Just sit back, have some popcorn, and watch the show. It's basically my advice here. Over in Iraq, as you know, they just recently had elections. And Muqtada al-Sadr won by a very large margin. But the election was challenged in the Iraq parliament, which is peopled with politicians who are under the control of the United States. And so they wanted a nationwide recount of the votes. But the storage facility housing over half of Baghdad's ballot boxes mysteriously burned down. Now, one of two cases is going to apply. Yes, Muqtada al-Sadr stole the election and didn't want that discovered. Or, after calling for a recount and questioning the legitimacy of Muqtada al-Sadr's victory, a recount would have affirmed that he did legitimately win the election, and somebody didn't want that to happen. So now there's talk about just have the election all over again. Getting on down to Iran, they're saying that time is running out for Europe to preserve the P5+1 deal, or the P4+1 deal, the Iran nuclear deal. Iran's Parliament Speaker Ali Lajani says time is running out for the European countries who want to save the nuclear deal. And Tehran is not going to wait for Europe's promises, which as of now have no time frame. In other words, Iran is telling Europe it's time to put your money where your mouth is and actually do something to indicate your commitment to maintaining this deal, other than simply talking about it. As you know, we're heading into the World Cup, and Nike has withdrawn the Iran World Cup squad's supply of shoes due to the sanctions. Now, I'm sure somebody else will step on in and provide the needed footwear. But again, it is an illustration of how all this political wrangling is just distorting everyday life for so many people around the world. You know, when I was a kid, we lived our lives, we did what we did, and politics was something that happened more or less occasionally. Something we'd talk about maybe in front of the TV news. But it was sort of confined to the politicians, to Washington, D.C., to the state capital or the county seat. But today, it's like politics is twisting absolutely every aspect of our lives. And that is a sickness on society and civilization. Finally, Xi Jinping is out there saying that China is ready to advance bilateral relations with Iran, as well as to strengthen cooperation with Tehran within the framework of multilateral mechanisms. So China and Iran are now moving closer together, which means when the U.S. gins up an excuse to make war on Iran, they're not just going to be dealing with Russia supporting Iran, but China as well. And I think China may have done this exactly for this reason, to send that message. Because China and Russia are probably realizing that the U.S., left to itself, intends to eventually try and conquer the entire world, and they don't want to go with that. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the war situation around the world. We're talking about Iran. And it does need to be recalled that back on May 21st, in his first formal public address as U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, speaking to the Heritage Foundation, basically implied that war in Iran is now U.S. policy. Now, of course, Pompeo has no constitutional authority to declare war on anyone, and I'm sure he knows that. But it included a not-so-veiled threat of a nuclear attack on Iran. Just go and nuke them if they won't do what we tell them to do, which seems to have become pretty much the entire U.S. foreign policy. Just like the mafia, you know, got a nice country here. It'd be a shame if something bad happened to it. So you do what we tell you to do, nothing bad going to happen. Now, if Pompeo was doing that at the behest of Trump, that's one thing. But it may be that Mike Pompeo, like John Bolton, is trying to basically put ideas out there with the imprimatur of being part of the administration that is not what Donald Trump wants to do. And I'm sure that Donald Trump is being urged by Netanyahu and these various billionaires who have financed him, like Sheldon Adelson, to make war on Iran. But at some point, as I was saying before the commercial break here, the rest of the world is going to realize that the U.S. government / Israel has become a rogue empire, and they're going to have to be stopped somehow. And I think that's why Russia and China have moved very closely together. I think that's why Russia and China are striking alliances all over, including Iran. Because the rest of the world is realizing, just as they had to learn this lesson the hard way in World War II, appeasement does not work. Now, Israel has claimed to have flown one of their F-35 stealth fighters over Iran undetected. And there was also a report that the Air Force commander, Brigadier General Farzad Ismaili, was fired for failing to detect this aircraft. But there are reasons to think this may be just more Israeli propaganda. Nobody can find any indications that this really did happen. And you need to understand something about stealth. Okay? It's not an invisibility cloak like you would find in the Harry Potter movies. Stealth means less of a radar return, but there's still a radar return. And radars are being made much more powerful to overcome stealth. Plus, these aircraft do make noise. And people will hear it. But nobody can actually back up this claim that Israel actually did this. If they did, it's a provocation. It's a provocation. When you fly a warplane into somebody else's country without permission, that's an act of war. So, anyway, apparently Israeli troops have once again opened fire on Gaza protesters as the Middle East marks Al-Quds Day. Apparently 4 people have been killed, 600 wounded during rallies along the border. And again, it's Al-Quds Day, which is an anti-Israeli day of protest held across the entire Middle East. So Israel is still out there doing that. Israel also conducted, apparently, a limited invasion into central Gaza. And they sent in armored Israeli military vehicles into Palestinian agricultural lands. And they bulldozed sections near the border fence while firing live rounds into the crowds. Now, Israel is saying this is necessary for security, but they bulldozed large sections of the lands, installed sandhills and barbed wire fences in the Gaza territory. This is not the security fence on the border. This is a new fence inside Gaza itself. And of course, it's just another way of tightening the starvation regime on the people of Gaza, because those lands were being used to grow food. Now, Michael Oren, who's an Israeli deputy minister, went on TV to say that all of these military actions comply with international law. Talk about chutzpah on that. So you show me in international law where the military has a right to open fire on unarmed civilian protesters using these expanding butterfly bullets. Show me where in international law where that is allowed. Because if international law says that's permissible, then I think it's time that we get rid of international law. But it's ridiculous for them to go on saying that this is right and this is permissible. The optics alone tell you what's going on. Israel just uncorked on these protesters with these expanding bullets designed to create maximum injury and death. They're targeting journalists. They're targeting the medical personnel. No, that's not allowed under international law either. You're supposed to leave the medical personnel alone. You're supposed to confine your fire to actual combatants. And we're hearing all this talk in Israel now of just going on in and cleaning out Gaza, just killing everybody, getting it over and done with, and then just writing out the PR nightmare. I remember all those years ago under Netanyahu's predecessor, when they made a big deal of giving Gaza back to the Gazan people. And it was in exchange for the international community not objecting to the increasing illegal settlements in the West Bank area. And I remember when that happened. And I said, once those settlements are facts on the ground, and the West Bank is carved up so it can never be a Palestinian state, Israel will just go back in and take Gaza back on over. And by the way, when Israel turned Gaza over to the Palestinians, they demolished, hundreds of public buildings and civic infrastructure. They trashed the place before they left here. All right, let's take a phone call here. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Now that the G7 meeting is over, can you tell everyone what's going to start happening on July 1st, since Canada and the Europeans are very, very pissed off with Trump?
Well, we're not really sure. I mean, Trump basically refused to sign the joint G7 statement, which means it may soon be the G6. And but again, I think the result of the tariffs are going to be that countries are just going to want to stop doing business with the United States, and they're going to start finding other customers for their product.
Right. Now that you mention that, I was reading an article over the weekend where there's an increase of American farmers killing themselves due to the poor weather and also due to the fact that people are not buying their products.
Well, the poor weather, yeah, that was a problem. Contrary to the global warming hysterics, we are heading into a new mini ice age. And over the last few years, it's been very obvious that the growing season is getting shorter and shorter. And yeah, the farmers who can't make it, they're losing their farms. They've lost everything. Yeah, they're committing suicide. Of course, that may be accelerated if they're on prescription antidepressants. The CDC came out the other day with this shocking statistics of how suicide is just on the rise here in the United States. And everybody's out there saying, oh, it's the economy, it's the wars and everything. Yeah, but all those people who are killing themselves are on some form of SSRI or other antidepressant. And there is a link. If you go to ssristories.org, you will see all these case studies. And the one that has stuck in my mind is this kid who tried to commit suicide. He'd been put on these antidepressants by his doctor. He tried to commit suicide. They intervened and saved him. And when it was all over, they said, why'd you try and kill yourself? And he said, I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I couldn't help myself. But of course, Big Pharma doesn't want you to know about that, and so they're going to come out with all these other excuses why people are all of a sudden killing themselves.
Right. And finally, I was reading the Guardian paper this morning, and there was an article that talked about the Bilderberg meeting over the weekend.
Yes.
And did you see the same article where they're basically most of the people there, they want America or NATO to go after Russia and Iran?
Well, that's what they're telling us the people want. But again, we know right now that the U.S. government and the corporate media are engaged in massive propaganda to get the American people to say, yeah, it's okay, let's go along with this. But I think if you just talk to ordinary people, for the most part, they're going to realize going up against a military peer is not a good idea. But again, corporate media's job is to sell us a new world war. Again, I'm not really trusting of these reports that claim everybody wants this to happen. They're relying on the herd instinct, that if we're told that 90% of our fellow Americans want to go on over and blow up Russia, that we'll just say, well, I guess I'll go along with that, and yes, let's go blow up Russia. But we've got to stop being sheep, because if you keep following the flock, sooner or later you're going to step in poo.
Well, that's very true. Well, Michael, that's it. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Okay, we just lost Joe. All right, now, getting on back to Israel. As you know, a lot of people, including your humble host here, have really voiced our outrage over what Israel has done to the Gazans, is doing to the Gazans, especially that Bloody Monday massacre of simply setting up fortified positions and opening fire on unarmed protesters with these expanding bullets. Apparently, over in this private school, Riverdale Country School, there was this teacher, history teacher, Sean Redden, and he basically commented in his history class about what's been going on with Israel and Palestine, and that prompted an outcry by the Jewish community. You can't do that. You can't teach the real history of Israel and Palestine just because you're a history teacher. And so he may lose his job over this, according to this story in the New York Post here. And what was really interesting is the Riverdale Country School issued a statement that said, at Riverdale Country School, we believe there should always be a robust dialogue and debate of different points of view. At the same time, all community members must be treated at all times with respect, as outlined specifically in our principles of school life. In other words, you've got freedom of speech and the right to debate everything except Almighty Israel. We're going to go back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, remember that report that Kim Jong-un replaced his top leadership just in case, like, he had to come back into the country?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that report.
I didn't believe it, though, but just like I didn't believe he machine gun. Remember, there was like you said, there was, like, reports like his sister's brother's uncle was 50 caliber. It's all propaganda.
It is like propaganda. I mean, that story was discredited. The one where supposedly he fed his uncle to these starving dogs in a pit. And Dennis Rodman was the one who basically came out and said, no, these people are still alive and they're doing fine. But if you go back and you look at the run-up to all of these wars, there's always a media campaign to portray the leader of that country as somebody so vile you could never possibly oppose a war to get rid of him. They were talking about how Saddam Hussein liked to kill his meat animals by hand, and all kinds of stuff that was going to just absolutely anger the liberals at the time. But yeah, that's the same thing. We don't really know what Kim Jong-un is like, because we can't rely on the corporate media to give us an accurate portrait.
Well, yeah, they say, well, either they starved their own people, or they gassed their own people, or they chucked the incubators out. I mean, it's just, when are people going to just realize it's all crap? All you have to do is go on YouTube and watch a video of people going to work in North Korea every day.
Yes.
They did have droughts and stuff. I mean, that'll kill people, because didn't we have the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression?
Oh, we sure did. People, and a lot of people died. A lot of people died during that.
No. But nobody blamed Washington, D.C.
No. Well, actually, right? Yeah, they did. It was poor. It was poor land management.
Hey, Mike, getting back, maybe Trump, that was going through his mind, gee, will they let me back into the U.S. if I go to Singapore? Maybe I have to go to Canada, but they ain't going to let him back in now after the tariffs.
Yeah. Yeah, Trump just seems to be annoying everybody around the globe here, but, I don't know what's going to happen when he comes here to Hawaii, if anybody's planning any protests or anything. I mean, I'm not going to bother showing up myself, but... but he's going to be down here at Pearl Harbor, and that means the traffic around here is going to be gridlocked.
Yeah, Mike, on that report, remember that was in the Kuwaiti newspaper, that first report where the Israelis flew the F-35. It's a bridge too far for Israel. If they wanted to attack Iran, they can't do it, because it's just a bridge too far. So it's all rhetoric. It's a pretty far away.
Israel doesn't want to attack Iran. Israel wants the United States to attack Iran. And again, if you look at the operational range of an F-35, there's no way that it could get from Israel to Iran and back without a midair refueling. And that's where the story breaks down, because those airborne tankers have a big radar cross section. And everybody's going to know that's what they are, because they go up and they go on station and they just fly these long ovals so that aircraft can come up and refuel. Anyway, listen, I got to take another break here for commercials. And thank you for the call, Dustin. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, because of Israel's egregious actions against the Palestinians are applying to the International Criminal Court to have Israel's officials behind all of this charged for crimes against humanity or war crimes. And Israel is obviously not wanting that to happen. Israel was able to defeat a Security Council resolution at the United Nations simply by pulling the little puppet strings on Nikki Haley. And Nikki Haley reminds me of those old talking dolls Mattel would sell, and there was a little ring in the back, and you'd pull the ring and they would say something. And, of course, the Nikki Haley doll, all it ever says is veto, 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 Israel good, Palestinian bad. There's a General Assembly resolution that's going to come up for a vote. Now, of course, it's non-binding, but it is expected to express the sense of the world over what Israel is doing. And, of course, the United States has no veto over that. But getting on back to the International Criminal Court, Israel is trying to derail the possibility of prosecution there by challenging Palestine's statehood. Now, as you know, Palestine was recognized as a state in 2015 by the ICC's legislative body, the Assembly of State Parties. It's also been recognized as a state by the General Assembly of the United Nations. So Israel is sending their lobbyists over to what is called the pretrial chamber And they are arguing that in point of fact, Palestine fails the test for being a state at the ICC because of its non-contiguous land mass and its inability to provide for its people, all of which, of course, is the fault of Israel itself. But that's their latest tactic to say Palestine isn't really a state, therefore we can go on committing war crimes against them with impunity. And again, the optics of this are really, really bad for Israel. Nobody is buying Israel's excuses or justifications or their lawfare. We, the people of planet Earth, have an instinctive understanding of what is right and what is wrong. And we see that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, has been doing to the Palestinians ever since they stole their country and continue to steal their country for their homeland, it is wrong. It's been a slow motion invasion and conquest. Now, Israel is also faced with an internal turmoil between the ultra-Orthodox Jewish population and the more mainstream Jewish population. And the issue has to do with the military draft, because up until recently, the ultra-Orthodox Jews have been immune from that draft. But it's building to a head because the Knesset is getting ready to pass a law that will say all young people are eligible for military service. More about this when we come back from station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about this new law being proposed in Israel, which will make all young people eligible for the military draft and service in the IDF. And the ultra-Orthodox Jews formerly had been exempt. And basically, the ultra-Orthodox parties are threatening to quit the coalition government over this law. And Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is saying that he doesn't think they're really going to do it. It's a bluff. But if they do, they will pay a price for it. So little tensions over there in Israel itself. The North Korean foreign minister basically came out describing Netanyahu as a stinking Zionist who kills Gaza. Not exactly a statement to be making on the cusp of this summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un. But this was coming from Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho, and basically lashed out at the Israeli Prime Minister on Twitter. Described Netanyahu as a child killer, which, yeah, a lot of kids are being killed over there in Gaza and the West Bank. Now, Israel has done one thing, and I actually agree with this. I think Israel just did a good thing. I don't know what their actual motives are. They may be bad. But Israeli special forces have gone down to South Africa, and they're starting to train the farmers there to ward off these violent attacks that have been triggered by the new government's declaration that all of the white lands are going to be confiscated without compensation and turned over to the black population. And a lot of the black population, not willing to wait for the formalities, have started attacking and murdering white farmers. And there were 74 farm murders and 638 attacks on these white farmers between 2016 and 2017. And so Israel has sent their special forces down there to basically train them how to protect their homes. Now, that's an interesting situation because we have rising violence here in this country, and we're seeing whites being targeted. And what is our government doing? Oh, you got to give up your AR-15s. Got to give up your gun. Trust us, we'll take care of you. What they told the Native Americans here. I know we touched on this story before, but I wanted to hit it again because of my concern that despite the vast, unimaginable sums of money that have been poured into the military by the United States government, that we are not ready to take on a military peer. I mean, if you really look at it, we're stuck in Afghanistan, we're stuck in Syria, We're still stuck in Iraq. These are countries that really didn't have the military might to resist the United States, and we're still not able to prevail. Now, you want to talk about going up against a true military peer like Russia or China? So apparently in the wake of these accidents they had out here in the Pacific between some of our warships and commercial shipping, the Navy has run a survey of the junior officers. These are the ones who are going to actually be put in charge of the ship's ongoing operations. The ones, the first tier underneath the captain and the first officer. And apparently they found out 83% of junior U.S. Navy officers lacked proficient seamanship skills. So I don't know what they're teaching them over there at the Naval Academy. But when I saw these accidents here, I knew it had been a mistake. Somebody had messed up. And of course, you remember the propaganda that was all over the internet at the time. Oh, those foreign countries, they attacked our warships using these very expensive super tankers and container cargo ships. It was a deliberate attack. No, it wasn't. And the Navy fired a lot of the senior officers involved in this. It was an absolute mess up. And I said at the time, you know, they weren't following the rules. They don't know how to handle the hardware. These, you know, $100 million warship, billion-dollar warships. They don't know how to handle them. And I'm speaking from a position of having grown up with boating. You know, my father was a big boating enthusiast, and then later on in life, I was a rag setter. I did a lot of sailing in and around the Channel Islands off of Los Angeles. So I don't want to say I qualify to be a junior U.S. Navy officer, but clearly there's something missing in their training, and that is a red warning flag. But again, looking at the military-industrial complex, they're making their money selling weapons and ammunition, not necessarily training the officers. The military-industrial complex, especially when you get into the Cold War mentality, the idea is we're going to get all this money away from the American people, and we're going to make all this stuff that looks really impressive in military parades and air shows and stuff. But since we're not really going to have a war, then we don't have to worry about it being used effectively or efficiently. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Turning to our domestic political scene here, the situation in the swamp is getting worse and worse. The corporate media is trying to ignore this as hard as they can. That the FBI has been lying to the Congress. We're now finding out they're fudging those 302 forms. An FD 302 is an official FBI report of a witness interview. And why they don't just record the interview and keep that is a mystery to me. But we know those FD 302s are very easy to rewrite, fake, rig. We saw that in the FD 302 from Lisa Foster's interview with the FBI following the murder of her husband, where they were trying to set up this idea that dark-blued revolver that was found with the body was Vince Foster's nickel-plated revolver he inherited from his father. So they do that kind of thing. So they're fudging the FD 302s. They're planting agents inside the Trump campaign who were trying to entrap Trump staffers into compromising situations with Russians. And this article that came on out from chaletbooks.com is saying the problem is it's starting to look like this is just business as usual. And I'm starting to agree that this is what the FBI has always been about, going all the way back to COINTELPRO. The agency has gone rogue. The CIA's gone rogue. The NSA's gone rogue. There are all these agencies with vast sums of money and absolutely no moral character that are just out there fighting turf wars with each other, and to heck with what's right, wrong, legal, or best for the American population. Devin Nunes is out there slamming the Department of Justice for obstruction on the FBI spy documents related to Stephen Halper. Now, Halper is a 73-year-old Cambridge professor. He's got deep ongoing connections with the FBI and CIA. He's a former U.S. government official. And his former father-in-law was Ray Klein, former deputy director of the CIA. Now, Halper was outed as the FBI informant who infiltrated the Trump campaign to conduct espionage after the Washington Post and the New York Times ran reports that corroborated a March report by the Daily Caller. Now, the Caller detailed Halper's outreach to several low-level aides to the Trump campaign, including Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and a cup of coffee he had with campaign co-chair Sam Clovis. Now, remember, it's since come on out that Stephen Halper was paid $1 million to do this. That doesn't sound to me like this was an official sanctioned investigation. This was out-and-out espionage committed by the FBI against the Trump campaign and transition. And it's a huge scandal. It should be a huge scandal. But the corporate media is out there trying to just ignore it or deflect it away. And unfortunately, they seem to have some help from inside the system as well. And a lot of people were very surprised when Trey Gowdy came on out and defended the FBI's actions. And now Paul Ryan is siding with Trey Gowdy and saying the FBI acted appropriately in running a covert spy operation against the Trump campaign. No, they did not. And remember, the FBI has tried to come on out and say, well, we did it for Trump's benefit. We were concerned that Manafort was compromised by the Russians. And of course, Trump came on out and said, why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have even hired the guy if you said there was a possibility that he was compromised by the Russians. And of course, that shut up that line of argument. But this is Watergate all over. This has already gone past Watergate. And it needs to be gotten out there to the American people that this is what our government is really all about these days. Over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is out there saying that the FBI and the deep state are trying to delay the release of more Strzok Page records. They're now saying it'll take 2 years to process them and turn them over. And so the transparency at the Department of Justice is worse now than it was under Obama. Now, that's not to say that this is coming down from Trump. In fact, quite the contrary, I would expect that Donald Trump wants all of this stuff to come on out as well. But apparently he's just running up against bureaucratic resistance. The swamp protects its own. And it does seem like it's business as usual. And that is a real crime because that's not the way this country is supposed to work. Okay. Now, over at the Supreme Court, they have upheld Ohio's policy of cleaning its voter rolls with a use it or lose it system, which if I recall, way back when I first became old enough to vote, they had the same thing going in California, which was simply that if you missed a major election, you were scrubbed from the voter rolls. And that's actually a good idea because if you're on the voter rolls and you're not using, if you're not voting, somebody else can use that name on the roll for nefarious purposes. And so apparently somebody who wanted to have all those surplus names on the voter rolls in Ohio sued the state. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, it's perfectly reasonable. If somebody isn't voting, they shouldn't be on the voter rolls. And I absolutely agree with that. And that's a necessary first step. We've got to get it going in all 50 states. If you miss an election, you have to re-register to vote. It's not that hard to register to vote. You can do it online, in fact, these days, I think. But that was a good idea. But if Trump really wants to hang on to Congress this November, and if he even dreams of having a shot at a second term in 2020, we need a nationwide mandatory voter ID law. And the liberals are going to scream, it's racist, and no, it's not racist, because illegal isn't a race. Now, Robert De Niro has made a name for himself, not for his acting skills, but being one of the most vocal anti-Trumpers out there. And during the Tony Awards, he yelled blank Trump twice. Okay? Rhymes with duck. And he yelled it twice, and he got a standing ovation. Now, the Tony Awards were televised, and Robert De Niro was bleeped, so the home audience didn't hear it. But the idea that he got a standing ovation from all these liberals there, then he went on, apparently, Robert De Niro was the guest at an awards ceremony for high school students and launched on this profane-laced rant about Trump, even comparing Trump to Adolf Hitler. And again, you ought to think about the optics. I mean, for me, I used to have a lot of respect for Robert De Niro. That's gone. That's absolutely gone here. And Laura Ingraham came on out in response to the Tony Awards outburst, saying it's another celebutainment gift to the GOP and Trump. And Laura is absolutely right, because we look at this stuff and we're appalled at the childish behavior. Now, again, I am very disappointed in Donald Trump. I worked very hard to get him into that White House, mostly because I didn't want Hillary to get in there. But I did work very hard. And all of you loyal readers and listeners, you worked with us. We all pulled together to overcome the massive election fraud that was being mounted by the Democrats and overcome the opposition in the GOP, which didn't want Trump at all. And we got him all in there. But I am very disappointed in him. And I do not agree with a lot of what he's doing. But I wouldn't get up on a stage at an award show and scream profanities at him. That's not civilized behavior. And we do need to remember that Robert De Niro is an entertainer. He's an actor. That's what he does. That's what he's always done. Now, I used to work in the entertainment industry, but I have been a serious student of U.S. politics, political realities, going all the way back to when I got blacklisted out of Hollywood over the Vincent Foster murder. So I'm coming from a position of knowledge and awareness that I think is far superior to that of Robert De Niro. He is just an entertainer. And I mean, for him to say that was appalling. For the entire audience to give him a standing ovation for that. Well, that tells us that there is a big problem with our entertainment establishment in that it is very liberal, very left biased. We need a more balanced entertainment industry. We need some conservative money to come on in and start setting up studios, production, and distribution to regain the balance. That is something that is very much missing from our society right now, is conservative media, conservative entertainment. And right now, the conservatives are under attack. We're seeing it with all of the Facebook filtering or social media filtering. We're seeing it with advertisers who are being scared away from conservative media. So there's a culture war going on here right now. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economy. As you know, the Federal Reserve has this plan of slowly withdrawing $1 trillion in liquidity this year via quantitative trimming. They poured a lot of money into circulation, caused a great deal of inflation. Now they're trying to pull it back. But they're slamming into a little resistance courtesy of the BRICS nations, because a lot of that money has now been converted to foreign denominations and can't be pulled back. So year to date, the Federal Reserve has shrunken its balance sheet by $116 billion, which sounds like a lot of money until you put it in perspective. It's not that much compared to the trillions that were simply poured on in following the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. And it's all funny money. It's all funny money. So another article coming on out here from Zero Hedge. The clock is ticking. Modern slaves are not in chains, they're in debt. And yes, that's the reason we have a debt-based economic system, to enslave you, to enslave everybody, to transfer the real wealth of the nation into the pockets of the bankers. But the downfall of it is the debt can never be paid off, and it keeps growing until finally there has to be a reset. And it looks like we're coming up on it. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And apparently there was an active shooter situation over at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. The police have already issued an all-clear signal, and apparently there was no shooter. Somebody phoned in the report. They're calling it a stunt. I'm wondering if it was a distraction, and has anything gone missing from the Department of Justice? Oh, gee, we were going to turn these documents over to the House Intelligence Committee, but they just vanished. They disappeared right from the middle of the Department of Justice while we were all hiding underneath our tables and desks. No matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. Okay, getting on back to the economic news. As you know, Donald Trump sort of messed up that G7. He's refusing to sign the joint statement, and he came in with some really kind of out-of-the-box ideas, like ending all tariffs and import duties worldwide, or at least among the G7. And it was rather tempestuous, and again, alienating some of our traditional allies. But Trump came out with a statement that Russia ought to be allowed back into the G8. And everybody's saying, what's going on with that? But Sergei Lavrov has come on out in response to that saying, we're not asking to be allowed back in the G8. We're doing quite well on our own, thank you very much. So the G7, possibly soon to be the G6, is also an institution in decline. Over in Italy, along with the tempestuous results of their recent election, their economy is still in trouble, their banks are in trouble, their bond yields have plunged the most in 6 years. And Italy's new finance minister, Tria, is out there endorsing staying with the euro, even though the Italian people are saying they want to go back to their own currency. So that fight is still ongoing. Bitcoin is in trouble again. Apparently a Korean exchange suffered a hack attack, and the hackers stole $40 million worth of Bitcoins and altcoins over this last weekend. And the reality is Bitcoin has lost more than half of its value since last year's all-time high. So, anyway. People are starting to talk about what's called the gig economy. And it refers to the changing face of employment here in the United States of America, where the idea of a 9-to-5, 40-hour-a-week job is starting to fade away. And companies are hiring more and more temp workers, freelancers, contract workers, who will come in, do the job, and then they're let go. And this lowers their employment costs, obviously. It allows them to evade the Obamacare requirements. It allows them to have absolutely no benefits for these employees. And it's just another way that ordinary working people are being squeezed and basically crushed. Now that raises a question. How do all these corporations expect to stay in business if there are no customers out here with the money to buy their products? They got to be living in a dream world. You know, Claire was showing me this story the other day where the average monthly payment on a new car purchase is now almost $600. And she was saying how glad she was that we had just paid cash for the car we got to replace the stolen Honda. So it seems like the people to actually participate in the consumer economy, it's a shrinking population. And we see that with the retail apocalypse. And the retail apocalypse, you know, they're trying to blame, oh, it's online sales and so forth. And online sales are only a tiny part of it. Most people still like that retail experience, going into a shop, actually looking at the product and checking it out before they buy it, and buying it right then and there, not have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to have it delivered. But you can't have a functioning, robust economy if you're not paying the workers enough to participate in that economy. And there's a story that kind of underscores that as well. Apparently, Amazon is under fire again for using Chinese sweatshop labor to make the Echo speaker. And apparently, this factory where these are made, their employees work more than 100 hours a week for as little as $1.50 per hour. So, and I understand Amazon loves to sell those things. They love them in the homes. You know, makes it easier to say, Amazon Echo, send me a bag of Doritos or something like that. But we're coming up on a lockup where people are just not going to be able to buy the products in those stores and shopping malls or even online anymore. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm actually getting emails from people about Robert De Niro saying that they can't watch any of his movies ever again without thinking about this. And I know, I think he's got another one that's just coming on out. He may have actually just trashed his own box office with this stunt. And again, these are entertainers, and they have pretensions to political leadership. All right, we're talking about the economic news here. And over in Great Britain, there is a discount retailer called Pound World. And apparently, talks of a rescue have failed. They are unable to sell the business to a new angel, if you were. And so now it's gone into what they call administration. We would call bankruptcy. There are 5,100 jobs at risk. And the potential buyer, our capital, basically at the last second just pulled out of the deal. Pound World serves 2 million customers a week from 335 stores. It also trades under the Bargain Buys name. And they're going to try and keep the stores open while they go through administration. But we're seeing a lot of retailers, both in Europe and here in the United States. I mean, Toys R Us is now closed. Babies R Us is now closed. For Uncle Mike and Auntie Claire, that's a bit of a problem. Now that we have a somewhat better car than the Honda, we can range further afield to find what we need. But it's rather amazing to look around the landscape and realize that a lot of stores that carry the things that we need and want, they're not there. And we're having to go further afield or order online to buy what we need. Now, a little bit of good news. And it looks like Trump's steel tariffs are already having a positive effect here in the United States of America, because U.S. Steel has just announced they're reopening one of their factories. And this, of course, is going to play very well in the Rust Belt. And it's a good start, but we need more of it. The globalists were wrong. The globalists wanted a world in which everybody was dependent on some other country somewhere across the globe to hold the whole coalition together, and also, of course, to profit off the transportation fees. And we need to become more self-sufficient. Russia's already well on its way. When they had that ill-considered oil price war against Russia, Russia started turning inward and saying, we're going to start building up our self-sufficiency. We want to be able to make everything that we need within our own borders. And the United States should be doing exactly the same thing, and to heck with the globalists on this. Even the Pentagon is saying, because so much of our military material is sourced from other countries, that could be a problem if there is a major global war and those countries we're dependent on for bullets and bombs and bits and pieces that go into our weapons all of a sudden stop trading with us. On June 22nd, there will be a meeting of OPEC. It's likely to be somewhat contentious after the news came out that the U.S. government has asked Saudi Arabia to increase oil production before Washington pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. And obviously, Saudi Arabia, OPEC wants to restrict production to drive the prices back up. And if Saudi Arabia goes along with the U.S. request, then OPEC's really kind of stuck, because those other OPEC nations will either have to ramp up production and match Saudi Arabia's prices, or they're going to be sitting on a lot of unsold oil. Now, we've been talking about the growing backlash against both liberalism and globalism. And in the recent Ontario elections, the Progressive Conservative Party did very well. And their leader, Doug Ford, is going to be Ontario's next premier. And it's headed for a majority government in the 124-seat legislature. The Progressive Conservatives had won or were leading in 76 seats. And again, the Liberals just did horrible. Voter turnout was more than 57%, higher than the other recent elections in the province. Now, that's always a dead giveaway, because people are more likely to get out and vote against the incumbents when they're unhappy. If they're happy with the government, they tend to stay home and just say, let it ride. So somebody sent me a joke. What does the Liberal Party of Ontario and a minivan have in common? They both have 7 seats. Over at the European Union, their president, Donald Tusk, is worrying about the New World Order being dismantled. And yeah, they have hit some major problems. It's self-destructing because of that open border refugee crisis, the economic predations, the misbehavior of Brussels, reminding us all that when you centralize government, the more centralized it becomes, the more corrupt it becomes, the more controlling it becomes. People don't want that. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Trump's kind of on my mind. You know, if it wasn't for all the talk show hosts selling how great Trump is, he's not that popular. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles didn't even go to visit the White House.
Yep.
And, you know, if you could name me one campaign promise that he's held that wasn't to Israel, you know. So that's all I got to say about that. Now, Bourdain, the media trying to sell off Bourdain is killing himself when he's got a beautiful wife and a daughter, and everybody's making him food all over the world. This struck me as a mob hit. You know, let me tell you something. The only TV channel that's on in Israel is Fox News, CNN, anybody else. There's only one channel from the United States, and that's Fox News. And CNN has gone over and above the call of duty of telling the American people that the state of Israel is not so friendly. So I would be putting my money on that Anthony Bourdain was a product of a mob hit. And it's going to be sold as this crap about him killing himself. But everybody in the media knows different. I guarantee it. Thanks, Mike, for taking my call.
All right. Well, you've got it, and I'm going to have to disagree with you because when news of his death came on out, and Claire and I were both fans of him, not when he was at CNN, but when he had his own show before, we tuned in regularly. But as it turns out, I found an article that went into detail about how he was found. And he was found in a seated position with a scarf tied around his neck and to a doorknob. And what that tells me is that Anthony was engaging in a practice called autoerotic asphyxiation, which is where, while masturbating, you restrict the flow of blood to your head because you get a much more intense orgasm. But it is a very, very dangerous practice, and it's killed a lot of people. David Carradine, the actor, happened to him. I think that's also what happened to Robin Williams. But if somebody's committing suicide, they don't sit on the ground and tie their neck to a doorknob. That's just not it. I think it was just a horrible accident. And, I know a lot of people over at InfoWars, they were pushing he was assassinated. He was outspoken about Palestine. He had this weird tweet about being harassed by Hillary's goons. And he said it's not fun, which I can certainly attest to that. But with this one article about exactly how his body was found, I have to move this from assassination into probable autoerotic accident, because it does happen. A lot of very famous people have died that way. Okay? So we're going to move on over now to James in Charlotte. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Let me tell you about a purchase I just recently made through eBay, and how it was fulfilled, how it was brought to me. I was needing to do some furniture restoration, and I needed to get a large C-clamp,
yep,
which I didn't have. And I looked around I go to Harbor Freight Tools or some of the discount hardware places, and I looked at their website to see what they had, and then I looked at eBay, and I was surprised to find that they had exactly what I needed on eBay for about half the price that I could find at some of the discount hardware places, which surprised me. Plus, they advertised free shipping. So I went ahead and purchased it. A couple of days later, it arrived direct from the Amazon fulfillment center, I think somewhere in Kentucky. I believe Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Lexington, Kentucky, here to Charlotte, North Carolina. And like I say, it was free shipping. And when I checked, I was curious to see, because that's a heavy item.
Yes.
And I went to check to see how much it would actually cost me to ship this item back to the Amazon fulfillment center, and it was over $6.
Yes.
So apparently Amazon is getting some sort of subsidy, apparently quite a massive subsidy through the post office.
Yeah, they are
shipping their product.
Yeah, they are. They get a steep discount. In fact, the discount is so steep, the post office is actually losing money carrying Amazon's shipments. And a lot of people have complained about that because the post office is asking for yet another increase in the price of postage. And it's another case of all the money goes to the billionaires, and all of the costs come down onto the ordinary people.
Yeah, so, basically, we're the ones who are subsidizing Amazon.
Yes.
Will be, yeah. And I imagine the first-class postage will probably be going up again.
Yeah, that's what they want right now. That is, in fact, what they want. But yeah, Amazon's got this sweet deal with the U.S. Postal Service, and a lot of people have pointed to it and said, this is not right. This is absolutely not right.
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, everybody I know buys stuff through Amazon. I try and limit it. I just I think this is really about the first thing that I've actually purchased. It came through Amazon.
What was really interesting, though, is apparently Amazon is, placing items for sale with eBay now.
Yeah, it didn't mention Amazon on the eBay listing at all.
Yep. Well, who knows what's going on? But I wish you luck with the C-clamp. My rule for tools is you need to buy quality because there are a lot of tools out there that look really good and they are good price, and you go to use them and you find out the metal is substandard, things will break, drill bits will become very dull very quickly. And so I've sort of outgrown my home tinkering stage. But back when I did a lot of that kind of work, I'd always say, I want the best tool to do the best job. And, I think that's a healthy attitude for anybody who really relies on their tools. If you're just buying them to display them on the garage wall, then go with the lowest price. James, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Aloha to you, too. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole G7 thing, and once again, Trump is exceeding my expectations. And first thing he did that I loved was he was asking, why isn't Putin here? How can you have a G8? We should have a G8. How do you have a G7 without the Russians? And that took a lot of guts for Trump to do with all these attacks on him for 2 years. It's a shame that they were attacking our relationship with Russia for this long, or we'd probably have a lot more solutions to some of these world problems. But I really don't think I don't hear too many people giving Trump credit for that. But I was, it was wonderful to hear him say that, and I really appreciate the guts that it takes for him to say that, knowing how he's going to be attacked for saying that. The other thing is having all these globalists at the G7 really disliking him, like Trudeau and Merkel and Macron. That's what I elected him for. I'm ecstatic. I see these people. The fact is, the war is globalism versus nationalism. As a working man, a union member, I was appalled by NAFTA. I was appalled by the way the Democrats sold the working labor part of the party out to the crazy wing of the progressives and the left. And I had a friend who was a union official, and he used to say, well, we're a pro-abortion union. And I'm like, well, what does working on a ship have to do with abortion? And that, yeah. And then that's why the unions lost, we've lost our power, because they got political. I mean, I had another friend training for unions with the AFL-CIO, and they were telling him all about gay this and gay that. And he said, I didn't come here to learn about that. I'm trying to learn how to get a better contract for my guys. So, I see, as a populist, as a labor guy, I'm against, I think Trump is doing a wonderful job. He's doing what he said he would do. He got rid of TPP. NAFTA's probably in the trash can now, with Trudeau being, having a spat with him. And I'm ecstatic by it. I hear a lot of callers, running them down. And I'm thinking, this is exactly what he was elected to do. And he's the first guy since Reagan that really did what he said he was going to do. I mean,
well, let me back up here. Let me back up here a little bit here, and you do raise a valid point about Trump versus the globalists, and that is definitely something that he did run on. But TPP may actually be on the way back. But I think the reason people were kind of thrown by Trump's statement about Putin being there at the G7, G8, is it came hard on the heels of the U.S. Throwing more sanctions onto Russia. And it seemed like there was this open display of economic hostility, then followed by Trump's comment basically saying that Russia needed to be there. And I don't think, had Russia been there, it would have worked out very well for the U.S. because of the aforesaid sanctions. Anyway, we got to take a commercial break. Joe, thank you for the phone call. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the telephones here. Francis in Montreal, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'd like to talk about NXVIM, if I might.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know about it.
Well, I've heard about it. You know, there was that actress who apparently is up on charges for procuring women for this cult.
That's right, Allison Mack.
Yes.
And she was arraigned in court in the orange jumpsuit and everything. And it's being sold to the media insofar that it's being reported at all as just a sex cult with a kind of a bizarre guy who's got long hair and glasses, and he's just getting these women recruited to him for his own sexual appetites. But there's more to it.
Okay.
And one of the poorly reported aspects of it, you go to Frank Report and other reports, the Bronfman sisters are involved. And your audience may not know of the Bronfmans. They were so wealthy, they were such wealthy bootleggers during the Prohibition that Al Capone was subservient to them.
Okay.
And when the RCMP and the U.S. State Police in Saskatchewan, at the Saskatchewan border, tried to stop their booze running,
yep.
they mustered 127 gunmen, and they had to retreat before the power of the Bronfman's family. That's how powerful they're. They're so wealthy, they became respectable. In fact, one of these grandson, I believe, was head of World Jewish Congress. So one of these two sisters was involved. They used the money, and they have substantial money, enough to buy an $11 million private jet that can fly 4,000 miles. She fled the country. I think she went to a South Sea island. I think it was Fiji, with a large sum of cash.
Okay.
This is not about a sex cult. This is human trafficking.
Well, that has been reported. That has been reported that that's what was going on. And by the way, I think it's pronounced Nixium, despite the way it's spelled. But yeah, the allegations of massive human trafficking behind the cult has actually been reported.
That's right. And from what I'm reading is that there's all these Instagram whores, young girls that are being recruited for this off of Instagram, and they can make $50,000 in a weekend. Some of them are bragging about that. And they're usually being shipped out to Saudi Arabia. And if you go to Crazy Days and Nights, the entertainment lawyer, the guy who runs that site, is saying that a lot of these girls, especially the really young ones that are being attracted by glamorous stars like Allison Mack, are being sold off into Saudi Arabia, and they're even being used to pay like Chechen ISIS fighters for their mercenary work. Yep. And after a couple of years of harsh use, they just toss them in the foundation of a high-rise they're building and just cover them with concrete. Okay, so this is like a really nefarious thing. There's a huge, huge scandal brewing here, and there's a whole bunch of other events in a cluster that I don't want to sound like too much of a conspiratorial nutcase, but I just want to draw people's attention to it so that they can look at it and think about it. Because there were 2 high-profile suicides in New York City last
Francis,
weekend.
I got to cut you off because we're coming up on the station break. There's no question. There is a lot of human trafficking going on around the world and here in the United States, and that was something that Trump said he was going to be dealing with. And there have been some cases of human trafficking, or traffickers being arrested and jailed. But again, for some reason, it's something the corporate media stays away from. Especially the child sex trafficking. So anyway, Francis, not really, because I need to get on to some other things, but thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Interestingly enough, George Soros did an interview in the Washington Post and voiced his frustrations over the fact that his plan for a one-world government has gone awry. In fact, he was saying that everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And he was lamenting the rise of Donald Trump. He was lamenting the rise of nationalist sentiments all across Europe and here in the United States of America. And so Soros himself is saying the wheels have come off of his little one world government cart, and that's a good thing. And if you look at all the pain and misery and destruction this guy has caused trying to bring this about here. Now, over in Italy, Matteo Salvini, who's now Minister of the Interior, basically said that the borders are now closed. Italy will no longer accept any refugees. And that was part of what they campaigned on, and that's part of why they won the election. But just like here in the United States, the Italian government has got some resistors. And apparently mayors across the south of Italy are pledging to defy the closing borders order coming from the government. They're going to keep their ports open. They're going to keep on taking the refugees. Over in Turkey, Erdogan is responding to a comment coming from Austria that Austria is getting ready to start closing the mosques that have sprung up as the refugees have poured on in. And they want to close the mosques and start expelling the foreign-funded imams. And that's infuriated Turkish President Erdogan, saying this could actually lead to a war between Cross and Crescent. And he's saying Ankara will not sit idle. Remember the other day I was saying that we could be descending into a new dark ages? Well, here we are. We've got holy crusades coming again. God wills it, God wills it, God wills it. Now, you know, over in Europe, because of the refugee crisis, Sweden has become the rape capital of the world. Germany is not too far behind. And there was a recent incident where a 14-year-old girl was raped and murdered by a failed Iraqi asylum seeker. And this one got a lot of attention because the girl was Jewish, always guaranteed to really heat things up. And thousands of women and children have been raped in Germany since Angela Merkel welcomed into the country more than 1 million, mostly male, migrants from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. And so more and more people are seeing this as a failure of the German government. And the German people are getting fed up with it. They're fed up with the open borders. They're fed up with a justice system that's arresting these criminals and then dumping them back out onto the streets again. Now, apparently Great Britain has another problem they're dealing with. They have become Europe's cocaine capital. They have the highest number of drug overdose deaths and people who inject heroin. This is a report on drug use across the entire European continent. And again, I wonder who's making the money off of that, organized crime or some intelligence agency. Now this gets into something. This is a story that came out of Zero Hedge. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, the CDC recently came on out and reported suicide rates in the United States are really taking off. And they're saying, oh, well, it's the economy, economic pressures, it's this, it's interpersonal relations, a lot of people, you know, this and that. But this article is basically drawing a line between the increasing suicides and the increase in the taking of these antidepressants. There's a report from the National Center for Health Statistics shows that from 2011 through 2014, the most recent data available, close to 13% of people 12 and older said they took an antidepressant in the previous month to that survey. That number is up 11% from the period 2005 to 2008. The most recent numbers have increased by nearly 65%. Now, the last number I heard for right now today is that somewhere between 20 and 25% of the American people are on these medications. Big money maker for the pharmaceutical industry. And so you can see why they would not want any possibility of bad side effects to be made public, even though if you read the little package insert on these medications, it's right there in the warnings, can lead to violence or suicide. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Over in New York, Governor Cuomo is proposing legislation to make it even easier for a teacher to issue a red flag on a student. In other words, to basically say the behavior of the student troubles me, therefore you have to have the firearms removed from the student's house. Now, Cuomo has complained that the current red flag laws do not allow teachers that authority. He wants to give teachers that authority to basically say, we're coming over to remove your guns. Now, this is incremental, but it's still a gun grab. It's still a gun grab. Now, obviously, for responsible gun owners, they're going to keep their guns locked up tightly. And I know in the case of Parkland, the kid somehow found an extra key to the gun cabinet or wherever they were locking up the guns. But we're definitely going the wrong way. The more they grab the guns, the more crime goes up. And as it turns out, by the way, the actual number of gun homicides in this country has been in decline. They just fan up the mass shootings to fuel the hysteria to ban all of the guns. I think we should go back to what worked before, which was that everybody on their 12th birthday be taught gun safety and entrusted with a firearm. That's what happened when I was growing up. Everybody had guns. Everybody knew how to use them safely. There were no mass shootings. There was one attempted suicide, but that's a different matter. We'd take our guns to school. We'd put them in the cloakroom. Nobody thought anything about it, because we'd take those guns on the way home from school. We'd stop and chase the critters out of the farm fields. That was normal life. We didn't have mass shootings. Of course, we also didn't have prescription antidepressants. Now, we've been reporting over the last couple of weeks about some of the really ridiculous lengths that the liberals are going to in their social engineering. And as a result of it, there is a renewed interest in homeschooling. Parents are just getting fed up with liberal indoctrination, and they're turning to homeschooling. And of course, the public school districts and the local governments are trying to push back, making it more and more difficult to homeschool. They want the kids in those state-controlled schools. They want them indoctrinated. They want them taught obedience to authority, blind obedience to authority. Don't think, don't question, don't ask, don't analyze, just trust what we say and all will be well. Over in Minnesota, there is a major public library, the St. Paul Public Library, and this summer they're putting on 3 of these drag queen story hours for all ages. And basically, they're featuring performers from an event company that specializes in drag brunches. Basically, it's come under criticism. And they're saying they're putting on these events as part of its anti-Trump inclusivity campaign. In other words, we're going to have these drag queens in the library with the little kiddies just because we don't like Donald Trump. And I can imagine parents would be upset about that. And again, if the gays wanted acceptance, no problem with that. We accept them, no problem. But trying to basically force their lifestyle into other spaces, other parts of society, that's going to meet with resistance. And yet we're seeing that. Instead of just saying, yes, we're accepted by society, let's all live our own lives, our own ways, and get along peacefully. Now they're getting confrontational. And this gets back to that story about that baker, the Christian baker who refused to make a cake for this gay couple, and they took him to court, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court before the Supreme Court basically said that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was discriminating against Phillips, the baker. It took 6 years for this. And you have to ask the question, why did this gay couple feel the necessity to drag this guy through 6 years of court at huge financial cost, including the loss of his business, rather than simply say, okay, that's fine. Can you recommend another baker that would help us? That's called society. That's called getting along, and not turning every little interaction into a major confrontation. We have to go back to a world of common sense and just getting along with each other. That's all. Apparently, over in Chicago, and they got this on video, there was a 10-year-old boy who was grabbed by the cops and handcuffed. He was playing in his grandparents' yard, and the cops justified the treatment of him, saying that he matched the description of an armed juvenile who was considerably older. And these cops didn't understand. This is a 10-year-old kid, and somebody got this whole thing on video. It's amazing. There's been another case of transgenderism in sports. In this case, it's a sprinter who's a biological male but identifies as a woman, was allowed to run as a girl in the state meet, and of course, absolutely won. Because the reality is, it doesn't matter what you think you are inside. If you're a biological male, you have strength and height advantages over biological females. This should not be allowed to happen. This is basically cheating all those girls who are real girls. And this idea of allowing transgenders to do this is, oh, we don't want them to feel excluded. We want them to, feel accepted. Does anybody care about the feelings of the girls who are really girls? Apparently not. You know, they're just expected to deal with the reality. They're in a race they couldn't possibly win for biological reasons, and just be glad for it because, you know, the liberals think this is really good. It really is absurd. Okay, let's talk about the volcanoes, plural now. Kilauea is still erupting. They had 2 ash ejections earlier this morning. They still don't know when this might slow down or end. They're saying it could be weeks, it could even be years. But that part of the Big Island is now a no-go zone. And it's a mess. 600 houses have been destroyed. Lava is now moving in on that Puna geothermal venture. It's expected that that will soon go up. It's covered by insurance for volcanoes, so they'll be able to rebuild it and get that back online for the electricity. And then we have the Fuego volcano in Guatemala, which is really bad. And both Kilauea and Guatemala have been much larger eruptions than would normally be expected. And now yellow alerts have been issued for Mexico's Mount Popocatépetl, say that 3 times fast, and Alaska's Great Sitkin volcano. Now, like Fuego, these volcanoes sit on the Ring of Fire. And a lot of people are wondering if the Ring of Fire is waking up. Now, one thing that has been noticed is that following the monster quake in Japan that resulted in the Fukushima disaster, that seismicity has been increasing along the edges of the Ring of Fire. And it started from Japan, moving north and south. Then it was going across the Arctic sections. And it's like the entire Pacific plate has been readjusting a little bit. And yes, it could trigger quakes and volcanic eruptions. Over in northern England, they had a 3.9 magnitude earthquake, which is not too bad. You know, it's spilled a little tea and rattled the beds. But it's the first quake they've had in 10 years. So a lot of people are wondering about that one as well. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. Snow has returned to the Pacific Northwest. They have snow on the peaks there. One of our listeners sent in a photo from their home showing new snow on the mountain peaks there as well. And it does look like all those global warming hysterics were wrong. They're still out there trying to sell the idea that you need to pay carbon taxes. But there were a couple of monster blizzards up in Newfoundland. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Dave in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha, Mike. I hope you all had a blessed weekend.
I certainly did. Thank you.
Did you successfully pull off your roadie gig for church yesterday?
Yes, I did.
Now, what does that consist of? What kind of equipment do you move?
There isn't much to move. It's just basically for Claire's Choir, I maintain a website where they can self-teach themselves the music, and I'll make backing tracks for some of the music that they do, and I also got drafted as a singer. So that's basically what it is. The equipment is basically, you know, a laptop.
Yeah, whatever honeydew is next. I get it. I mean, that's our job. Right?
Happy wife, happy life.
You know, Amy has always meant for me to ask you, and I never have. Who sings what really happened? Your theme song. Who sings that?
That's Thania Crone, and that's from her album Kaleidoscope. And she did find inspiration for that song at my website, and graciously gave me permission to have that music as a bumper.
Well, it's wondered. We always were curious whether or not that was Claire, and you might just mention, I don't know that she would ever consider such a thing, but, you know, we would probably really all enjoy a song from her some Friday afternoon. We have to listen to you all week long. My word seems like the least we could get, you know.
Well, Claire writes...
I'm going to get back. I'm going to get back to it, man. Yeah, you know, I have to agree with Joe. I can't remember what city he was from. It sounded like he worked on a boat. Right. Yeah, man. Okay, so you can't have it both ways, you know. Oh, so we're upset that the Rothschild stooges, Merkel, who destroyed Germany, Trudeau, come on, even Canada's embarrassed by him. I mean, these people are so in the bank. So we're upset. Oh, we're being isolated. Man, we have really seen no negative, lasting, real, calculable implication from Trump's pro-nationalist trade policy yet. So what I want to encourage, and we all know we need to be self-sufficient if we're going to have a future. We can't just sell made in China to each other, let the Walton billionaires and Bezos make the money as they export it to communist China and think we're going to ever build a successful, vital economy. So we have to create demand that Americans have to get up off the Big Mac butt and be a part of producing what we need to consume. We might as well get on our knees and surrender to globalism. So, you know, of course, CNN,
we're not going to do that. Okay, Dave, I got to put you on hold. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Dave in Missouri, and my concerns about a trade war, and I agree with you. We do have to become self-reliant, at least on our key critical industries and supplies. My concern was that our manufacturing infrastructure and our economy are not resilient enough at this time to pull it off. And a lot of analysts have come on out and said that our debt is a major impediment that makes it very difficult to survive a trade war. But again, the reason people were caught off guard by Trump's comment about Russia, it was coming hard on the heels of these very hostile economic moves and provocations against Russia.
You said, when you heard him say that, your reaction was just as mine and so many others, like it's about time. We have a man willing to stand up in the face of all this adversity, blatant lies. Who are these people? What is their agenda? Of course, they want to separate the nationalist states. They want to drive us further into the hand of the Rothschild bankster cartel. That is their plan, because we were all to be their slave, Mike, and this has upset their apple cart. I mean, Soros is upset. Yep. So we're going to cry. You know, I mean, this to me is music like I've never heard. You know, I want to think that it's not just some sort of ethereal jazz band playing to distract us while the hand goes in our pocket again. That's really what I want to believe. But I've never seen anything like this happen. And if you just look at the geopolitical ramifications of what his nationalist policies, agendas, I mean, he's man enough to stand up and say it to their face. Never happened. No American politician ever did anything like this. So to me, this is a wonderful example. It's exactly what we need. All power to you. God bless you, Donald Trump. And please, folks, please support RBN and whateverhappened.com. And if Claire will sing us a song, Mike, hey, we won't have to listen to you so much. I love you. Peace out.
Well, you've brought up an important point. I've been asking, why is the deep state still trying to bring Donald Trump down when he's been giving them almost everything they want? But the one thing he's not giving them that they want is to take the United States along toward that new world order. And that may be the entire motive while they're still trying to get rid of him. And I know there's a lot of people who think a one world government is a great idea. But as you say, it's to permanently trap the human population into debt slavery to a global private central bank. And that is definitely a major reason for this huge push by Soros and his ilk. Anyway, Dave, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha.
Well, I have to agree with this. Hey, I have to agree with the sentiment about Claire doing a song on the air and all that, because that would take the cake. Secondly, the reason why I was calling is that regarding the sprinter, runner, whatever, was this dude on hormones at least, let alone having his surgery done?
I don't know. The story didn't go into depths on that, but even if he was, the reality is that a man who wants to become a woman, after the hormones and after the surgery and everything, he's still biologically male, and he's got that added muscle mass and that the added height.
That I got.
Yeah.
But then again, there's some that are female bodybuilders, and they can do the same thing for that matter. But the problem is that if he still has a penis, let alone the testicles, then he shouldn't have been allowed. I don't care if he claimed that he was Queen Madonna of Sicily, Italy, or whatever. I don't care. If he still has a penis, then he should not have been allowed to participate with the gals that were in that sprinting team, period.
Well,
I mean, that's just...
I disagree. Like I said, even if he's had the surgery and the hormone treatments and everything, he still should not be allowed to compete against real biological girls. It's simply not fair to those girls.
Well, genetically, you have a point there, unless something genetically is fluky going on with him. But yes, I would have to agree on the outset of that. Yes, but it seems like there's such a gray area with this whole transgenderism, transsexualism, or whatever have you. It's absolutely ridiculous, and quite frankly, it actually makes you want to question, even when people are born with both sexes, for that matter, how they deal with life. But I don't know. It's just getting absurd. It causes me to, whenever I am at the store and I'll watch someone going into the restaurant, I'm like, okay, and do they know which store they're going in? So, but anyway, enough out of me. Have a great one. Later.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go here, and we've got another caller, but I'm going to wait till after the commercial on that one. But again, the idea that there is this infinite number of genders and identities is a liberal invention. And I understand that gays really do have a genetic predisposition of being in the wrong body and so forth. But a lot of this stuff is just made up for political gain. And the liberals have been playing with this because they don't really have a platform ordinary people can identify with anymore. So they're just going out to this stuff. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Back with another call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mark, are you there?
Oh, hi. You hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay, good. Well, I want to just ask you a couple of questions. One about Russia and the situation there, and the other is about what you said about Robin Williams and that, what's that French guy's name that committed suicide there? Chef?
You mean Anthony Bourdain? Who's not French.
Yeah. Oh, I thought he was French. I thought he was French.
No, he was in France filming his show, yes.
Oh, okay. But anyway, what you say he strangled, what do you say? They put the rope around their neck and then masturbate? And that's how they kill themselves?
Well, they didn't intend to kill themselves, but unfortunately, this is a very, very dangerous practice. And in fact, if you go over to whatreallyhappened.com, there's an article where there's a list of very famous people who died this way. And one of the best well-known, most recently, was actor David Carradine. Yeah, it's a very, very dangerous thing to do.
I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, put a rope around your neck, geez. But anyway, the other thing is
go ahead.
about Russia. I mean, I'm wondering about, they're kind of bragging. A lot of times you hear these neocons come on mainstream talk and fake news network and all that, and brag about, say, well, we killed 300 Russians there, and think, do you think this is really true? Because supposedly those are Russian contractors, I think, killed in an airstrike. Supposedly they attacked American troops. And this is in Syria, okay? I kind of doubt it, because I think if that was true, the Russians would have done something back to us. I don't think they're going to take that kind of, that they would take that heavy of a loss if that was the case. And I remember when it supposedly first happened, RT denied, he said a couple of contractors were killed in an airstrike. They weren't all like soldier-type contractors either, but nothing like 300. I think that's a bunch of malarkey, if you ask me.
Oh, I think it was intended. I think it was an attempt to goad Russia into doing something. But again, Putin is trying very hard to not allow the current wars to escalate beyond where they are right now. And from his point of view, yeah, it would be a very simple idea to say, we're going to forget about these people who got killed, and we're not going to respond to it, because that would bring the U.S. and Russia into direct conflict, and that's a bad idea at this point.
I don't know. He's got hardliners in that country, too. That I don't know if they would accept something like that. Not that many.
Yeah,
you say, okay, a few were killed in it.
Putin's in charge of his government. Okay, Putin is in charge of his government, unlike Donald Trump, who's clearly lost control. He's got, John Bolton out there making outrageous statements, and, Bolton's a hardliner. But Putin, I think, is solidly in control of what's going on in Russia. And even the hardliners in Russia have to understand that going up against the United States militarily, it's going to be a bad idea. It's going to be a bad idea. Nobody's going to win a nuclear war. Both sides are going to lose. That's the reality.
So what you're saying basically is Putin is more sane than Trump.
At this point, I'm saying Putin is in charge of his government, and he's trying to find a way back to peace, as opposed to Trump and all of the agencies and advisors around him who see war as the best possible course for the United States to follow due to economic failings and so forth.
It just makes no sense, like with Trump bringing Bolton along with him too, for this, a conference with UN.
Yeah,
it just makes no sense. I mean, this guy's like this guy. You talk about crazy. This guy is really out there, and he's a coward too. He's a draft dodger from the Vietnam War.
Yep.
And now he wants to, put other troops in danger doing stuff that he refused to do. I mean, this is crazy. It makes absolutely no sense. Why he would put Bolton in there in the first place?
Well, he may be.
He's got
he may be wanting to keep. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, Trump may feel, first of all, Bolton, good or bad, is the national security advisor, but it may be that Trump wants to keep Bolton close and basically to keep an eye on him. Because if he leaves him behind, then Bolton gets to be interviewed all over the media, once again mouthing off about the Libyan approach to North Korea. So whether Bolton will actually be in the negotiating table or whether Trump will even allow him to speak remains to be seen. But Trump does need to learn a lesson from Putin, and he needs to basically get back in control of the administration, because at this point it doesn't look to me like he is.
I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to put Bolton in there in the first place. I mean, to make him national security advisor. The man is dangerous, and he's a criminal too. He's a war criminal. He was partly responsible for the Iraq War.
Yes.
He may be responsible for 9/11, or at least partly responsible. Maybe involved because he's one of the chief people of APAC, not APAC. What do you call it again? The Project for the New American Century.
Yeah, Project for the New American Century. Well, my understanding is that Sheldon Adelson insisted that Trump appoint Bolton because Sheldon Adelson and Bolton go a long way back in their support for Israel and their encouragement for wars on Israel's behalf. So that's why Bolton was named the National Security Advisor. But again, last week we had this story where Trump and Pompeo are telling Bolton to basically just cool it on the outrageous statements.
You know, Mike, the thing is this, as far as Adelson goes, if Trump can tell these European leaders where to go, he can tell Adelson where to go. The fact of the matter is, if I want to, really endanger myself, I have two big dogs. I mean, one's a pit bull, one's a half pit bull mastiff, but they're not dangerous, despite what people think. They're some of the most loving dogs you can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've known many pit bulls.
Yeah. Okay. But if I went another direction and decided, you know what, I want to keep a king cobra in the house and give it a free reign in the house, keep its food, I guess, give it a rodent or something once in a while, and think that I can just walk around and that the king cobra isn't going to bite, I'd be crazy. I'd be nuts.
Yes.
Well, it's the same thing. If you got a guy like Bolton, who is a crazed warmonger, a chicken hawk on top of it,
yes,
you think that this guy isn't going to at least advise you to or say things that can start a war? And by the way, Lindsey Graham is another nutcase. He was saying, I heard him on the radio yesterday, advocating that Trump needs to tell on either you do it or we tell you, or we're going to take military action against you. I mean, these people don't understand. Just if it was just North Korea alone, forget about if China got involved or Russia or anybody else. North Korea is an armed camp. They're dug into the mountains. They're dug into tunnels, much like the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong were in Vietnam, except much stronger because they've been working in these tunnels since the last Korean War. They're well armed. They may not be doing very well economically and all that, but they got plenty of weapons. The weapons that work. So, did they not realize the amount of casualties? You really think you could do this with the volunteer army we have now, where people don't even want to join anymore? Don't they realize they'd have to have a draft? Don't they understand the consequences? I told you that before, but with the consequences if we have a draft in this country, I think this country would be torn apart. I think it'd be worse. It would make the 9/11, not 9/11, the Vietnam draft riots and stuff like that and protests look like a Sunday school picnic.
I remember those.
I think I remember them too. The millennials, and the what do you call them again? The Generation Z. They go crazy. They go crazy. They're much more informed than we were when we were a kid. Okay, because of the internet. Because that's all they got. They don't get their news from Fox, the fake news networks. They get it right from the net. All kinds of different websites, including yours, by the way.
Yes.
All right. They're not going to buy that. They're not going to stand for that. In Vietnam, people still went for if we don't fight them there, we'll fight them here. You know, they try to use that nonsense now. It don't work. No. The Iranians are not going to invade this, neither the North Koreans. And whatever nukes this guy might have, he's not going to try to hit the United States unless he feels we're about to overrun him.
That's exactly right. That's the only reason to have nuclear weapons is as a deterrent. And you need to remember that in all of human history, the only country to ever actually strike another country with nuclear weapons is the United States. That's the only time they've ever actually been used as an offensive weapon. People want the nuclear weapons to basically give potential invaders and attackers a reason to stay home and watch some TV instead.
I'll tell you, Mike, there's two countries that I'm really concerned about that I really think are dangerous. And it's not Iran, it's not North Korea, and certainly not Russia or China. It's Turkey and Israel. Both have leaders that are, I really think that the elevator isn't going to the top.
Yep.
Either Netanyahu or Erdogan. Both got powerful little armies, okay? They both got a history of aggression against other countries. Turkey was an empire. And
yes.
They were known as fierce fighters. The Ottoman Empire was about 1,000 years, if I'm not mistaken. Erdogan, I think, really wants to bring back that Ottoman Empire. And Netanyahu, I don't know what goes on in that man's mind, okay? But again, the elevator doesn't go to the top. So this is what you talk about dangerous countries. Now, if the U.S. and Russia were really cooperating with each other, instead of, fighting each other and talking bad about each other and saying they want to interfere in our elections, all the other nonsense. We cooperate with each other. We might be able to put a leash in both Erdogan and Netanyahu, and maybe, make clear to them we're not going to tolerate their nonsense, and they need to get out of Syria, both of them. They need to leave the Kurds alone. They need to leave the Syrians alone, and start treating the Palestinians a lot better than treating them. Okay.
Yes.
But that's if you have the two superpowers cooperating. But you don't. And this is one of the reasons we have what we have.
Well, yes, no, you're absolutely right. The problem is that for the world to have peace, everybody has to want that peace. But it takes only one fanatic with an army to wreck it for everybody else. And again, looking over the last 17, 18 years, the U.S. and Israel are the aggressors. They're the ones constantly attacking everybody else. This world war, I'm afraid we're the bad guys. And I think that people in America, in the United States, are waking up to that realization. We're the villains this time. And another reason to avoid a world war is I think we're going to lose it. Especially if it goes to nuclear weapons, we're going to lose this one.
Well, there's going to be no winner. I don't think there'll be a loser, or we'll all lose. I really have my doubts the planet. Look at all the problems these volcanoes are causing, right?
Yes.
I mean, the one by you there in Hawaii, the other one, where is it, Nicaragua?
Guatemala.
Okay. Guatemala, I'm sorry. But anyway, just imagine if you had an out-and-out full-scale nuclear war between the United States, Russia, China very likely would get involved, so would India and Pakistan at some point, and probably Israel would get in their licks too. So what would that do to the atmosphere? I can't see there being any world left if that happened. I can't see a winner or a loser. I think we'd all lose.
Well, I'm in agreement with you, but, all of these world leaders and billionaires, they have their underground bunkers already built. They actually think a nuclear war is survivable and winnable.
RFK told JFK Jr., not JFK Jr., RFK Jr. Went through the nuclear missile crisis. I think JFK Jr. is like 9 years old or something.
Yeah.
He says, don't bother going in. We were telling him to go start getting into the bunkers. He says, no, don't go. We're not going in there. He says, because because there'll be nothing to come out for.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that view. I'm in agreement with that view. It would be a hideous mistake. Anyway, listen, we're running out of time here. So, Mark, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much. And we're going to take one more phone call. Mateus up in Canada. And Mateus, what's on your mind today?
If you look at it from the perspective of the entire galaxy, the other civilizations' perspective, basically, any emerging civilization that discovers nuclear weapons, there's kind of like a safety mechanism built in, where if the species that discovers the nuclear weapons are really stupid, are really unwise and dangerous and violent to the point where you wouldn't want them part of your galactic community, you don't have to worry about it. They're just going to blow themselves up anyway.
That's true.
And then the ones that don't blow themselves up, it means that they have not just intellectual intelligence, but also wisdom and compassion and kindness and some sort of spiritual or moral evolution to go along with it. Those are the ones that make it into space and join the Galactic Federation or whatever. And I was surprised to find out that in the Canadian parliamentary elections for the federal or the national elections, that you can elect an MP, like a representative, and then they can just cross the floor, it's called. And that literally means walk across the floor from one party to the next without having to quit their job and go for re-election. Is that the same in the States where you can elect a liberal representative and he can just walk across and become a Democrat without asking permission for it by anybody?
Yeah, there have been. It doesn't happen a lot, but there are occasionally members of Congress who will just announce that they're changing parties, and they stop being a Republican and they start being a Democrat.
But what was the point of electing that person as a Democrat if they're just going to tray you and go? I can't believe that's allowed. Is there any reason that makes sense, that's fair, that I'm missing?
No, it doesn't make sense. But again, nobody's ever challenged the practice down here. And it's just another reminder that the politicians are opportunists. And, it does look bad. The optics are bad on that. No question about it. And those politicians who have changed parties tend not to do very well after that. Anyway, Mateus, we have to take a commercial break. Thank you for the call. We're going to close the phone lines for the last segment of our program, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and we were talking about human-caused global warming. And you probably remember from all of the so-called documentaries on global warming that you saw on corporate media, the West Antarctic ice shelf, which is the source of a lot of icebergs that break off and can sometimes interfere with shipping in the southern oceans. And every time one of these giant icebergs break off, the global warming people go, see, the Earth is warming. The Antarctic ice is melting. And then they'll send an expedition down there to document the melting ice, which gets stuck in the ice and has to be rescued. Well, it turns out that NASA has discovered that underneath that West Antarctic ice shelf, there is a magma plume, similar to the one which is driving our Kilauea volcano. And as the name implies, it's just a part of the magma that, for reasons of convection, has pushed up closer to the surface of the Earth, and it acts as a heat source. And that is what has been causing the West Antarctic ice shelf to basically lose these icebergs. And that's it. It's a force of nature. It's not caused by human activity. So the global warming people have now decided they can't sell this to the humans anymore. So now they're turning their sights on the cattle industry. And they're out there saying that, we have to know how much methane these cows are producing, because the livestock industry is placing the Paris Climate Agreement in jeopardy because we don't know how big an impact all this methane is having on climate change. And it really is silly. It's just about trying to get more money or more control over the planet. And the Paris Climate Accord was never about the climate. It was about basically starting the framework for the global government, a global environmental authority, and then they were going to have a global health authority. That one kind of fizzled in 2009 when pigs fly flu turned out to not be the imminent disaster that it was predicted to be in all of the corporate media here. So they've kind of stumbled on that one. Facebook is hiring news credibility specialists to identify websites that need to be censored, which is why I don't use Facebook anymore. Anybody who wants to hear my opinion on things, you come right on over here to Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. And story coming out of 12160, Propaganda machine Google manipulates your search results by burying info that, quote, contradicts well-established fact, end quote. And as a good example of that, apparently Google's internal handbook instructs engineers to bury natural news web pages from search results, because natural news is saying things that harm the profits of the medical industrial complex. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's back, tanned, rested, and ready, and I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here at Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. Share it with everyone that you know. Email or face-to-face. Stay off of social media. It's a complete waste of time these days. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.